Zenless Zone Zero has just made over $96 million globally. And you probably shouldn't really care about it, whether you like the game or not. You shouldn't play the best-selling game that you don't have fun with. But I think it would be fun to make fun of the videos that were saying Zenless Zone Zero already failed with the slightest levels of information. Like this video by Aimtash doesn't really age that well. It's not even a week old. Actually, I clicked into it. It was about the game doesn't really perform on the Twitch and streaming in general because it's boring to watch. And what makes this even more ironic is the exact same pattern also happened back when Whirling Waves is released. There were so many Doom posting out there with the Whirling Waves, and now it's one of the most successful gacha games. And now the Zenless Zone Zero. It's almost like the law of physics at this point. The more people shit on the gacha game, the better it's gonna perform. And with so many that kind of thumbnail feeding into my YouTube algorithm, I also can't help but to believe it for how many people talks about it. And it turns out those are just a bunch of balonies. And I think the performance of the Zenless Zone Zero also proved the other thing. We as a gacha community, which probably account for a very small part of the community, and I believe that there's probably a huge group of players and just enjoy the game without joining the discussion on the YouTube. Those are probably the majority of the player. I think this is probably the second time that it proved this way. The other time that I saw this phenomenon, about half years ago, is back when Genshin gives up 3 pools as the anniversary gift. The community were fuming about this reward. Boycotts is going on everywhere. But then the revenues of the Genshin just kind of slapped these people in the face with their probably all-time high revenue. And that reminds me of a story that I heard from a podcast about a MMA fighter. It was about he took a walk outside the night before he stepped into the ring for championship. He just kinda looks around when he walked and saw these old couples minding their own business. And he had this moment of realization that these people probably doesn't even know about the fight. Even though in MMA community, there were like tens of thousands of people are talking about their fight, but they are even more people who doesn't care about the fight that he was about to have. And I think this kind of mentality and realization is somewhat humbling. And I do consider that is a pretty good mindset to have, to realize that you are not the center of the universe. I didn't actually click into these videos. They might be reacting to videos that is talking about the Zenless Zone Zero's failure, but it doesn't really matter now, I guess. So let's take a closer look to the number. If you take a look at the revenue of Genshin Impact and Honkai Star Rail in last month and minus the revenue of this month, is pretty much the same number that Zenless Zone Zero made in this month. So pretty much anyone who noticed the number would probably think that, oh, the player actually moving from Genshin and Honkai Star Rail to Zenless Zone Zero.
Build a patch exists, my man! You think every single month we're gonna get a Firefly? You think every single month we're gonna get an Acheron? That is just that easy.
But to be fair, the patches in Honkai Star Rail and the patches in Genshin are pretty dry. We can't really prove anything aside from speculating. But regardless of that, the number's actually worse than you think, because on top of that revenue, they certainly ran a really crazy marketing campaign behind it to make sure that the launch is going to be successful. I'm saying that they're not getting those revenue for free. So with that taking into the account, we can assume that the revenue isn't ideal, but it's not exactly the bad thing for MiHoYo, because I think it's kind of unrealistic to make every single patch good in one game. And when they separate that into 3 games, MiHoYo would have easier time to come out with good patch from different game, so they don't have to keep up with every patch in one game, which is a pretty good business decision. And the other perspective is that they don't want to put all the eggs into one game. It's better to separate the risk into 3 games. in case if one of the game flop, which nobody can actually predict about it, because you know every game has its own lifespan. To have games stay relevant for eternity like CSGO, Minecraft, Grand Theft Auto 5 are a super rare case. But I do think that Genshin might become one of those games that never really die just for the incredible size of player base they have. But nobody can really predict it. I think it's not a bad idea to have your player base swapping between your company's game before they actually bored or burn out. And it's definitely better than swap into other gacha game from other company like Whirling Waves. And let's look at the Whirling Waves. It's making $30 million, which is without shadow of a doubt a massive success. Yeah, and that's pretty much my armchair business analysis. But there's one thing I want to talk about the Whirling Waves is that I think the game has done so much favor to the gacha community, because with the release of the Whirling Waves, the MiHoYo has began to improve the quality of life in the game, which player has been asking for years. Like in Genshin, where you can actually finish your daily from just spending energy. And recently they have also given away 1600 Primogems for the Neuvillette incident. They're actually trying to nerf Neuvillette, but eventually backpedal it because the Chinese player base actually take this to the Chinese authority, accusing that this is the act of scam. And also with the good news about the 1.1 version of the Zenless Zone Zero on largely reducing the amount of TV modes. I think some of the TV mode are actually fun, but as I said in the last videos, there are still too much of a TV mode for a combat game. But regardless of the ranking, I think it's really not our concern. But people kind of keep discussing about it and posting videos about this. I feel like I'm in one of those situations where people surround me get excited over things. I would just get excited along like a dog with zero clue about what happened. Not gonna lie, by looking at the chart, I do feel like watching a spectate sport where you pick a side and cheer for them. And that brings me to one thing that I want to talk about today. Just because your favorite game is performing better than other game doesn't mean that you are better than other people. I think it's always good to feel happy about somebody else's achievement, but to take that thought to competitive levels is just somewhat unhinged to me. And that leads to the topics that people are frequently talks about lately, probably second to Shadow Legend, and I'm talking about the tribalism. And according to Tectone and HateJuice, they said it's coming from a bunch of people spending too much money into the game at the point of no return, so that when there's other game that coming out that would challenge their choice of game, they have to attack the other game's community in order to justify the money they spend on their choice of game, which is a pretty reasonable take to have. I can see why is this insinuating people to attack other community, but I don't think this is the main reason, because I don't see myself spending thousands of dollars in a game and spend my time on the Reddit or Discord to initiate the attacks on other community. So I kind of disagree with Tectone and HateJuice in a small way. I'm sorry if I misrepresent the ideas, but this is how I interpreted it. Some people need their ego to be fed more than others. And what is the easier way to power trip than talking shit about something on the internet? If they weren't arguing about the gacha game, they would probably argue in other topics. And there are countless of topics in the world to argue, like the sport, politics, YouTubers, other game. All they need is anything that is going to feed their ego. And if you happen to be this type of person, I would suggest that you can also feed your ego without putting other people's down without the expense of other, or do it in a constructive way, taking care of the relationship you have to earn the respect, or spending time to build a skill so that you would feel confident about yourself and you would probably get less offended by stuff, especially over an internet argument. And everyone is kind of different, so you kind of have to figure this out by yourself. Everyone has very different challenge in their life and takes time to understand about yourself. You're gonna need a lot of effort to earn the respect that way, more than arguing with rando online. But trust me, it's gonna worth it. And that's all I wanna talk about today. See you guys.